Hey folks, it's Doug Blake with Body Design University. And in today's video, we're going to talk about something that I think is really, really important. And I hope that you have this issue. It's called a fat loss plateau. Why do I say I hope you have this issue? Because that means that your clients are actually losing body fat. You don't get to a fat loss plateau unless you've initiated a nutritional exercise strategy and a person has actually lost body fat and now they got to a sticking point. So, I mean, you can have folks losing 10 pounds and they hit a plateau. You can have people losing literally 20, 30. I've had folks losing a lot of body fat because they had a lot of body fat to lose. And after about a month and a half, 2 months, in some cases, even 3 months or longer, although that doesn't happen very often. I don't see people hitting plateaus after 5 months. Normally, it depends on the starting body fat percentage, but normally about two, sometimes upwards of 3 months, depending on how tight they are on their nutrition, you're going to start seeing a plateau. But again, it could be 30 days or so. But remember, that's a good thing. If somebody's hitting a plateau, that means that they're hitting some level of metabolic adaptation because they've been losing body fat. If a person doesn't lose body fat, if they're not getting the results that they're paying you for, then guess what? They're never going to hit a plateau. Essentially, their starting position is their plateau. No, we want to get people to lose body fat, and it's common. This is not an uncommon scenario. For those of you that are training people, you know that your clients hit plateaus at certain points. Sometimes they hit plateaus in their training, but more than likely they're going to hit plateaus in their fat loss. And that, again, that's a good thing. We are interested in having people hit this fat loss plateau. And I just want to give you a couple of tips on how to help break through this. There is no, I'm going to be honest with you, there's no clear-cut definitive way, but there are 3, maybe 4 things that you can do. Keep in mind, you have to at least acknowledge, right, that you're in a plateau. First off, are you really in a plateau? And that's why I'm putting this in here. I just wanted to show you losing 5 pounds of fat in 3 weeks, which is great, by the way. Okay, what's that, a pound and a half, I guess. By the way, any loss of body fat is good. So we're not going to discount that that's good. But if you lose 5 pounds of fat, let's say you started out at 25%, your client starts out at 25% body fat and they have a fair amount of weight they need to lose, right? This client probably has 20 pounds, maybe 25 pounds of body fat that they need to lose. Chances are if they've lost 5 pounds of body fat in 3 weeks, and then they don't see any changes, right? You've been training them and they're telling you they're on their meal plan. They don't see any changes for another week. That's not a plateau. Basically, they need to dial it in better. I'm going to be honest with you. I've seen this 1,000 times. If I've seen it once, you have a client, they lose some water weight. By the way, I'm assuming this is body fat loss, but some people, they lose water weight, for instance, and that could be 5 upwards of 10 pounds. And this is off the subject, but they could just have a better digestive movement and a transit time of eaten food material that's now passing through, and they're expelling fecal material that's in their intestines. Well, that can account for anywhere from 5 to 10, in some cases, even more body weight than that. That's not fat. I'm assuming that this individual lost 5 pounds because perhaps you did a body fat caliper measurement, or you put them on an InBody and you figured out that it was body fat. You just need to dial it in better if that's the case. I'm just giving you an example. However, you have a client that loses, say, 20 pounds of fat. Now, remember what I said, not 20 pounds of body weight. I'm talking about fat. Now, yes, okay, if there's a couple of pounds of lean body mass loss, it's not the end of the world. Ideally, we would like to see gains or maintenance of lean body mass while they lose body fat, but that's not always the case, and that's okay. Somebody that loses literally 20 pounds of body fat, let's just say you calculated out that this individual, to get to their healthy body weight, needs to lose 50 pounds even of body fat. And they've lost 20 in 3 months. Okay. Now that you're looking at what? Something like 7 pounds a month, right? To lose 20 pounds in 3 months. What's that? 6, 7 pounds. It's roughly 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds per week, something like that. Normally what we see is that individuals will lose weight in some cases fairly quickly. They'll lose 2, maybe 3 pounds the first week, maybe 2 pounds the next week, and then things will slow down. Why? Because of the fact that they have a metabolic adaptive element going on. So as the person loses body weight, their metabolic activity is going to adapt to the caloric changes that have been made, if you've made any, which leads me to the other point here. So losing 20 pounds of fat in 3 months, if you're not seeing any new fat loss after that, a week, 2 weeks, your client's going to come back and say, man, I'm not seeing the dial move anymore. What do I need to do? That is a plateau. That's truly a plateau. Well, there's a couple of things you need to do, but remember, before I move on to giving you the tips, understand something. How did the individual lose those 20 pounds? See, here's a big problem that we see with the diet industry. That's why we don't do diets. And don't talk about diets to your clients. These are lifestyle modification changes to their eating patterns, to their meal planning. Okay. Diet means that you're cutting something out, it's sacrificial, and it's short term. Diets mean you're doing something, now you're going to have to go back to normal. No. If the reason, listen to this, if the reason that individual lost 20 pounds was because you cut their calories, i.e. what doctor assisted weight loss programs do, in some cases, dietitians and nutritionists will do this. For the average person, think about this, if the reason they lost 20 pounds was because you cut their calories from where they started, you cut their calories down, well, what are your only options? That's why I'm not moving on yet. What's your only option for this individual? If they hit a plateau, the only thing you can do is what? Cut their calories even further. That's the mentality. That's the mentality in the diet community, the diet world. No, that's a terrible idea. For the average person, by the way, the average person out there, the average client, and I'm telling you from training hundreds and hundreds of people, the average person is not eating enough food. They're eating too few meals throughout the day, okay? And each meal has too high of a caloric intake, generally, not all the time, but generally. So most folks are not even eating at their required or requisite caloric intake. The average person is probably eating 200, 300, maybe 400 calories lower than what the predicted BMR activity level thermic effective food is going to be. So I hope that makes sense. If the reason they lost that 20 pounds, look right here, losing 20 pounds of fat in 3, if the reason they did that, and by the way, an individual that simply cut their calories and lost 20 pounds, it ain't all body fat, folks. In fact, probably a lot of that's going to be lean body mass. So that is a scenario. If that's how you did it, well, you started off on the wrong foot. Hopefully the reason they lost the 20 pounds of body fat was because you did the exact opposite. You figured out and you calculated. It's a predictive measure. It's a predictive measure. You basically looked at their predicted caloric need, right? And you upped their calories and you spread out the caloric intake over multiple meals. That's the right way to do it generally, okay? People eat 2 meals a day. Sometimes they throw a snack in there. That's just not an effective way to meter out calories throughout the day. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I don't want to get into the full issue related to the energy balance equation, but the plateau is due to a metabolic adaptation. If you started them with a normalized, normally it's an increased caloric intake spaced throughout the day, and the macronutrient profile is correct, well, you got their metabolism up a little bit. And now basically what's happened is as they lost body fat, what do you think is happening? Well, now their normal metabolic rate, which is still normal, now has come down to satisfy this new body weight. Okay. So an individual at 200 pounds, just as a for instance, they lose 20 pounds body fat. Now this 200-pound guy is at 180 pounds. Well, I mean, by default, his caloric intake should be lower than when he was 200. And if he's consuming the same number of calories, even though it's spread out throughout the day, then generally the understanding is that the metabolic processes, that adaptation is now going to be down to a 180-pound male. The point is that as soon as somebody hits this plateau and they're not able to lose any more body fat, what do? Well, what are your options? First off, this is write this down, burn this into your brain. Generally, when a person loses approximately 10% of their starting body weight, generally, this is one way to look at it. If I go from 200 pounds to 180 pounds, time to recalculate. Remember, you calculated the BMR. You went on to the computer and you said BMR calculator, you put their information in, or if you had an operating system that does this for you, and voila, bam, 2,000 calories, 2,200 calories, 1,800 calories, right? Because you added the activity level, AL, right? Activity level, and you added the 10% of the thermic effect of food. You just need to recalculate that. Now it's not a 200-pound male or 130-pound female or 150-pound female. It is now a 135-pound female, right? Because thankfully they did lose body fat, but you just recalculate it. Once you recalculate, that will bring the new caloric need component down probably a couple of hundred calories. Sometimes that is all it takes. I've seen that many times where literally, now remember, I say to recalculate, that's the formal way, but in reality, if I know my client is eating 2,300 calories, I pull them down to 2,100. I make a couple of adjustments here and there. Piece of cake, really simple. Cut out one egg, cut out, half a banana, cut out a little bit of this, a little bit of that, boom, and you're down 200 calories, 300 calories, easy. Don't change the meal frequency. Don't do that. Don't cut a meal out. No bueno. That is not what you want to do. Secondly, here's something else. If you want to get, a little crazy, I don't always recommend this, but for some folks, if they have been really, really good at this and they are following the meal plan, you can start making some modifications to our recommended 40, 30, 30, 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. You try to make some modifications with that. When you change the macronutrient ratios, for instance, if you add or change the percentage of protein, right? That's going to change the net caloric value of your entire day's caloric intake. So just as a, for instance, don't hold me to this, but you could go instead of 40 carbs, 30, 30 protein fat, you could modify those macros a little bit and go 30% of your calories now from carbs, 40% protein, 30% fat. You could do something like that and you can experiment. I've done that any number of times with folks and to great success. Generally, the modifications you're going to make is what I normally do is change the protein and carbs and I switch them around. I simply add more protein as a percent of total calories. And because proteins have a higher thermic activity level, you don't get the same net caloric value from proteins as you do from carbohydrates. So you could modify the macros. Just don't get crazy with this stuff. The other thing is this. My clients have done a great job. Fantastic. But I know that they're still drinking soda. It's their one thing that they couldn't let go of, but they dialed everything else in. We have some residual areas and sometimes without changing anything else. Now I could, of course, recalculate my BMR. I'm going to do that anyway. But even if I did not do that, I could tweak I could tweak what they're already doing by really tightening up some of the things I know are residual issues: sodium intake, processed sugar intake. Okay, so that's something else to consider. And I put that, with some exclamation, tighten it up. So let's tighten it up. Now that you've done this, now we need to remove the processed sugars from your diet. Let's go ahead and cut your sodium intake back down, because my client, maybe they eat a lot of salt. Once again, they've done a great job losing body fat, but now, let's tighten up a little. If that is one of the issues, if you can tighten things up a little bit, and that should then kind of push them over that edge. You're still going to need to recalculate caloric need, but this is an area that I think is worth exploring with your clients. The other thing, of course, is at the very end of the day, increase energy output. Basically, what you're talking about here is just do more exercise. I mean, that is another option outside of the nutritional. I would say that you can play around with that if your client is willing. I would once again make sure you do the recalculation of their caloric need. Always do that, but then have a conversation about perhaps adding another, 10 to 15 minutes of cardio if they're not doing it. See, remember, the assumptions that I'm making with these little tips for you is the situation that your client is in. If your client has hit a plateau, they're crushing it on their days off with their cardio. They're doing great. They're tightening it up. All you really need to do at that point is probably just recalculate their caloric need and maybe do some modifications of their macros if that is the case. Keep in mind, ultimately, it's recognizing that they hit a plateau, recognizing that, and then talking about now in a positive way the changes that you want to just instill to ensure that happens, because it can be discouraging. Even though they've done great losing body fat and getting their body weight down, even with that, that's encouraging. Well, and then they get discouraged. Please keep in mind, you recalculate. Do not, listen, write this down, write it on your forehead backwards so you can see it in the mirror when you wake up, and do not change meal frequency. I've had athletes, particularly bodybuilders, working at 7 and 8 meals per day, especially when they were getting into pre-contest condition. Not all of them, but a lot of them needed this metering out of their calories. Instead of eating 400 calories, they needed, for whatever reason, glycemic control issues related to blood sugar. They needed to eat even a smaller meal, but wait a minute, I still need caloric intake. And so with your clients that hit plateaus, recognize it, first and foremost, recognize it, and then move them forward. You got to do something. And those were the tips I think that are going to help you out a lot. Look, if you like the material, if you like what we talk about here at Body Design University, go ahead and subscribe. You can always click on the notification button as well. We put this material out so that those of you that are training, when you have clients, you can be more successful at helping your clients do the one thing that they pay for, which is get results. Listen to that again. Your clients pay you to get results. I know they like you, and I know they like spending time with you, but you got to get results. And that's why we want to help you out doing this. If you have any questions, just reach back out to us. It's always a pleasure. Let us know how we can be of assistance to you, and we will see you next week.